Hello, I'm V.B. Price of the New Mexico Mercury. We're here today with my dear friend Bennett Hammer, a man I've long admired for his generosity and his scrupulous attention to the details of the law. Hammer is the founder of the Hammer Archives, a 30-year project of collecting materials on LGBT issues in America and New Mexico. He's been a licensed real estate broker in New Mexico for 38 years and served on the New Mexico ACLU Board for 12 years, the last 3 of which he served as New Mexico's representative on the National ACLU Board. Hammer, it's wonderful to have you with us.
Thank you, Barrett.
I've got a lot of little questions I want to ask you about the archive, but I guess the big thing I want to do is ask you, how did you come to amass an archive of over 100,000 items, news accounts, and editorials from dozens of papers?
Something between obsession and coincidence has gotten this whole archive together. I was motivated on LGBT issues for many years and very much admired people who were in activism and people who wrote and people who spoke. Your articles in the Albuquerque Tribune on all topics, including LGBT topics, inspired me. Neil Isbin and Russell Gray inspired me in their outspoken activism in the 70s and 80s, but I never thought that I was a person who would fit into that mold of being a public spokesman. And I just wondered, one thing is, how would I know more about these issues? And then how could I help the movement for LGBT equality? And so one day, over the many years, we kept reading about hate crimes against gay people, right. People killed in the East Mountains, north of Santa Fe, around the country. And that motivated me deeply to know more about this and say, why are people being killed over this?
Yes.
And it seemed that every time a gay issue would come up in public life, in the media, there would be more hate crimes.
Right.
And so one day, for many years, I had collected articles about these topics, but not that many, in 70s and 80s, even though I was interested in them. And then one day, when Clinton was going to run for president in 1992, I was in the basement of the building that I lived in and doing laundry, and I ran into a shopping cart full of Wall Street journals, like a whole year of them.
Really?
A pile of them, and I looked at them and I said, oh my. And then I looked around, there's nobody there. So in between wash and dry, I took them upstairs into my apartment. And
that's great.
And I said, with all the hate crimes and with Clinton's gays in the military, and I didn't know really anything about it, I said, I'm going to just go through all the Wall Street journals and cut out every article with the word gay or lesbian in it.
That's really how it started.
So I got the scissors out and I stand in the kitchen because I think better when I stand.
Sure.
And started cutting them out until I had, even from just 1 year of Wall Street journals, I probably had 200 articles right there. And I said, oh my, there's like one a day in the Wall Street Journal.
Heavens.
One article a day. And often it's, the Wall Street Journal is not just about money. It's about culture and law and all these things. Yeah. And so about money, you'd run into articles about how do single people who are together as a couple manage their money. And
okay, yeah.
Not only was it gay and lesbian issues, it was about marriage. It was about things that were to come in a more formal way in lesbian and gay life.
Right.
And so I cut all of them out. And then I got very interested in organizations and thought and law and culture about gay and lesbian issues. And I collected the articles and I joined several gay and lesbian organizations and would collect their literature. And then went to conferences and things, and I found that, and also rallies and also adversarial things like marches. Right. And found that the gay people and their opponents, whenever they were together, were just screaming at each other.
Right. Yeah.
Talking at each other and not seemingly getting anywhere in way of coming to any common ground at all. And so I said to myself, well, I'm learning more about these things from these articles. And then I started collecting everything in the beginning of 1993. not only the Wall Street Journal, which I suddenly began to subscribe to, but the New York Times, the Albuquerque Tribune, the Albuquerque Journal, the Santa Fe New Mexican, anything I can get my hands on, the Los Angeles Times, and Newsweek, and Time Magazine.
Wow.
And I started collecting everything with the word gay or lesbian in them.
So one of the things I've always been fascinated about and wanted to ask you about was that if you have 100,000 clippings, we all know what that means. They're just little pieces of paper sort of stuffed in files. But not you. You decided to make a document out of each one of these things.
Yes, I did. Soon after reading these hundreds of articles myself, I realized that others would benefit by them. Others meaning people who are opposed and people who are for gay rights.
Right.
And so I collected, the whole collection is, or the whole project is of anybody's opinion and newspaper articles. And so I didn't censor them for negative things about gay people. Everything's in there. And so ultimately a researcher who is interested in writing against gay people would find this project valuable. So
Good for you.
when I love all points of view, so when when you cut an article out of a newspaper and you say, well, what am I going to do with it? When people give you an article from a newspaper, they copy it crooked, sideways, the date isn't there, you can't read the print, and so it's virtually worthless.
Right.
But I wanted to share these with people. So what I did is I would copy an article out of a newspaper, and it would look like, it wouldn't look very good. It would be dark, it would be reduced, and it wouldn't look very nice. And I would recast it on an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper.
Right.
I would enlarge the print. I would put the name of the newspaper, the title of the article, and the page number, so that people would know where it came from, that it would be easy to read, it would look nice, and people could copy it easily in a copying machine.
Would you show us one of those?
Well, here's before on the left, and then after on the right.
That's so great.
And doesn't
And
it
let me
look?
tell you, as a researcher, I know how important this is.
Doesn't it look nice?
It does.
And I was scrupulous as I could about getting all parts of the article and not skipping them and just getting them all right. And then what I could do is I could give them out to people. Well, it quickly became known that I had articles on all sorts of topics about gay and lesbian people, about law, about culture, and about marriage, and about schools, and bullying, and hate crimes, and every possible subtopic there would be. And I got calls suddenly from people who had started to receive these, and I remember getting a call from a pastor in Clovis. There had been a hate, or some town like that, there had been a hate crime, and the town wasn't taking it seriously enough because it was a gay kid. And so I had a whole bunch of articles by then about hate crimes, how the people who perpetrated them then, and probably now to a lesser extent, got easy sentences,
Right.
easy punishment for even gruesome crimes. That's changed a lot in the last 20 years, but it was pretty wild then. And then I collected on other articles and other topics until I would be going to conferences and the articles would be coming back to me.
Wonderful.
And I said, oh, this looks interesting. And I knew that it had been copied 2 or 3 times, and it still was readable. And that was the goal, that it would end up on people's coffee tables. This was before email. Like the pastor in Clovis said, do you have any articles on that? And I said, sure. So I mailed them to him. Got them in the mail and then spoke to him afterwards, and he said they were very effective. People might not have said too much, but they walked off with the articles in hand. They're going to read them. And so people who, whatever they were thinking in the way of opinions, would be challenged by the newspapers that they read every day, that they respected, and that it was not they or the gay and lesbian advocates who would be screaming at each other. It would be almost third-party stuff, informing them on how it worked out.
I know you've been working with Barb Corbel to put the archive into a form that it could be housed in a library. Where is it being housed now?
First, I don't want anybody to think that we have 100,000 or more, and it will be more, items, organizational items, print media that are ready to go to any library now.
Okay.
They need to be sorted, processed, indexed and digitized. There's about six years left to this.
Really?
And we need resources to do all this work because it's enormous. It's thousands of hours to make everything look nice like the original archives. So there's probably 10,000 of the articles that I've done myself over the last 20 to 30 years. And there's another 100,000 to go.
Good God.
On all these topics.
Wow, that's huge.
And so,
oh my God.
Barb Corbel, who's an historian in this area, who's taught lesbian and gay studies for 30 years, who has vast knowledge of the history, is the director of this archives project. And it's called the Hammer Educational LGBT Archives Project. At the end, when it's all done, it'll be called collection. And I don't like to call it a collection thing because I don't want people to think it's done.
Yes, right.
It's years away from being done. But it's about 350 boxes in storage, which are being sorted and made, how do you say, edible for the public.
Right.
Now, Barbara did the archives for Neil Isbin, a greatly admired gay activist here who died in 1996. Right. She spent about 5-6 years doing it. He had 136 boxes. Many of his print articles from the 70s and 80s are going to be included in the Hammer archives.
Great.
But she had personal journals and all sorts of things from him. He was more organizational. He got the Albuquerque Public Schools to institute an anti-discrimination policy in 1992, unanimous on the school board.
Wonderful.
He was driven, knowledgeable, eloquent, a great guy. And so Barb has done this before. My archive is designed to educate people, persuade them to a certain point of view, but they may not be persuaded, but just to look at middle-of-the-road media to say to read. And also I have things like Life magazine, 1945. I have an article, the first anti-discrimination law in the country in New York State.
There are other LGBT archives around the world, and I'm assuming now that the Hammer Archive will join that.
So eventually this project, when it's called a collection, will go to and be housed at the Fray Angelico Chavez State History Library in the Palace of the Governors.
Wonderful.
We had that arranged with Tomas Hayen, who's the curator there. We've spoken to him for at least 10 years. And they're ready to accept this project as an enormous collection, and then it will be available to anybody in the world. A lot of the gay and lesbian history and some archives were bombed in 1933 in Germany.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Oh, God.
So there was a Magnum Hirschfeld archive about 100 years ago, 1910, 1920, which was one of the very earliest ones. And so...
in Germany?
I think so. And a lot of the material was bombed out in 1933. But the important thing about lesbian and gay archives is that they be all kinds of different archives located all around different places in the world. So when they bomb one, they won't ruin them all.
Yes, of course.
And so in the United States, there's archives in Amsterdam and London and Germany, Australia. And there's, in this country, there's mainly institutional archives, North Carolina, Duke, in New York, the New York Public Library, one ILGA, which is a combination of two International Lesbian and Gay Archive, in California, did I say Kentucky? And when we had started in the 90s, this wasn't a big archive, but the Treader Archive in Minneapolis is now a major world archive. And that he was putting that together, and one of the articles we have is from the Minneapolis Star-Tribune from 1999. Wonderful. With Mr. Treader in his two-bedroom apartment stacked to the hilt with buttons and all sorts of stuff and memorabilia, and now it's a major library in Minneapolis. And so... Great. Mine is the Hammer Archive is considered a community archive.
Ah, okay.
And the archive, the Hammer Archive, is New Mexico lesbian and gay news, but it's also from around the country and around the world.
Right.
And so people who are making a point about any issue about lesbian and gay life in New Mexico would have lots of articles about what was happening here, like in 1993.
Right.
I think in 1979 or 1985, Governor Anaya proclaimed an executive order prohibiting discrimination based on sexual orientation. I think he called it preference then, in state hiring.
Wonderful.
In 1994, Mayor Chavez did that in Albuquerque.
Did he really? Good
Yeah.
Good for mine.
And in 1997 or 96, the city passed a hate crimes policy for the city of Albuquerque.
Huh, wonderful.
Things like that happen, and you don't remember them right away.
Yeah,
but they're out there, and it was on Beethoven's birthday, which was very nice. It was December 16th.
That's great.
So it was a very special day.
I seem to remember that NPR did a program on archives. Is that true?
NPR did a piece called Queer Archives in 1998, and it was a survey of archives, lesbian and gay archives around the world.
Okay.
And it's a 30-minute piece, and I got 6 minutes of it.
That's great.
And which was wonderful.
Sure.
And the Hammer Archives then and now, now in a sense, is still considered a community archive because it's not an institutional archive yet, like they have in North Carolina and California and the New York Public Library and other places around the world, Minneapolis.
Right.
So it's they did a very interesting piece, and he really covered a lot of territory.
That's wonderful. Mm-hmm. You know, I know, having served on the ACLU board with you, that you have a particular legal fascination with these issues. Could you talk about it briefly?
It was prompted by gays in the military, and I know that military law is more narrow than civilian law.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, it seemed to me, and it always seemed to me, and it still does, that the Constitution applies to all of us. Yeah. The Constitution talks about persons. Now, if you maintain that gay people are not persons, okay, gay people are out of it. But if you acknowledge that gay people are persons,
well, corporations are
and corporations are persons,
yeah.
then the Constitution applies to them. Equal protection, freedom of association, right. The privacy rulings, or that implied privacy. And so I thought that the Constitution should apply more to gay and lesbian people, and that was part of the idea of all this, dealing with legislators and talking about court opinions and having those articles and thoughts going out to people who were reading the archive articles so they would understand how the law applies more.
Right. In the broad picture of things, what is the ultimate goal of the archives? What do you want them to achieve?
My motivation initially was based on hate crimes and lack of understanding right. of all the parties about this. And so it ends in the same place. Right. That the archive collection would be accessible for people who are researchers, religious people, legislators, anybody who want to know more about these topics, and the ancillary topics around them.
Right.
That don't have the word gay in them, like marriage. Right. Although lately that's all it has. And also for young people who are looking for help,
yes.
to go online, because almost everybody has computers, and they will in several years from now. An 11 or 14-year-old kid who's in Montana somewhere and still can't tell anybody that he's gay, and go online and look for help. It's for the wide range of people and researchers. So it's ultimately to save lives as it started in the beginning.
You know, we deeply appreciate the work you do. LGBT issues are everybody's issues, just like any other civil rights issue. Oppress one group of people, everybody's oppressed. Help liberate another group, we're all a little freer. This is terribly important work, and we're honored to have you with us on the New Mexico Mercury. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
It's wonderful to have you
Pleasure.
with us.